as I had kind of mentioned in the intro, there's been huge shifts in our country, which nobody can really doubt. And the technology community is a really important voice and a really important community and a really important part of how our world operates and unfolds. And social media and Facebook and Twitter are places where they're not just places where friends connect now, they're places where political views are shared, opinions are shared, people win elections or don't win elections in part by their use of those. And so the next 30 minutes is really just a discussion about what are the lessons that the technology community can learn going forward, and how do we look at recent events and also begin to kind of break this barrier that exists between the two parties and the two kind of opinions that don't really serve us. And so I'm happy to have Dave and Rob and Justin to kind of share your thoughts and views on where we go from here. And for me anyways, and people could disagree with me, I feel like there was one candidate saying, we're going to go forward, even though she wasn't I didn't feel like she was super enthusiastic about the forward. Another candidate saying we're going to make America great again and go back. And technology has been pushing so fast forward, and we have change happening at such incredible levels, and we haven't always been as thoughtful about the impact of that change. So I would just love to start by hearing how you see this world, how you see the kind of chain of events that have happened, and your sense on kind of what are some of the lessons we can learn from that. Do you want to start, Dave?
Do I have to?
You don't have to, no. We can start on the other side. Justin, do you want to start?
Sure. So I guess the election was an eye-opener for me, as it probably was for many of you. And I think it brought to mind two things. One was kind of more of an immediate pressing question, and one that's a longer-term question. And the more pressing question, which I was very depressed about in the beginning, but surprisingly, I think things are actually happening, was that we've, kind of online in our communication medium, whether it's Facebook or Reddit or Twitter, we've created these systems where we give people what they want, right? A lot of people have talked about filter bubbles and how people are able to create their own information diet where they just consume the things that they want. People, whether you're liberal or you're conservative, whoever you are, you want things that confirm your existing biases. And it's very hard to resist that. That's just human nature. And so we've created a lot of systems that reward that, right? Whether it was Facebook 6 months ago or other social media platforms. And without, I think, thinking about some of the potential consequences, especially political consequences. And so I think that was one big problem for Silicon Valley, and for I think that the sites I've worked on are maybe a little bit more entertainment focused. So I certainly, for me, it was never something I thought about, like what type of information are we giving people. And then the second thing, more longer term, is I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that there's been increasing economic inequality, and that's seen by people all across America and in the middle of the country and in a lot of cities that aren't in Silicon Valley and the Bay Area. People don't feel like they are participating as well as they have in the past decades in the economy, and that's only going to continue, right? Lots of the things that we're working on are things that increase, income inequality and create more of a winner-take-all market. So, I invested in a company that's a self-driving car company, right? My brother and my co-founder from Justin TV started, called Cruise, and that is going to happen at some point. And what's going to happen to all the people who are driving Uber?
And you sold your last company, Twitch, to Amazon, I think, for just shy of $1 billion.
That's
so
right.
What do we do with people like you?
Well,
because the tech is creating vast amounts of wealth in a beautiful way, but how does that?
Absolutely.
Have you thoughts on how that can become more of a shared uprising?
Yeah. So I'm incentive when income inequality becomes too much. Historically, that's really bad for everyone, including rich people, because what happens is there's French rebellion, and we get strung up somewhere. So I think it's very concerning, and the question is not, to me, it's like people will always find new jobs to do, right? U.S. used to be more of an agrarian society. It's transitioned to one that's much more based on an information economy, right? And that happened over hundreds of years. But people there's still jobs, or we have new jobs. Social media celebrity is a job, right? Snapchatting might be a job. But the question is how we make that transition, right? And I don't think we're thinking very actively about that right now. And if there's like, Uber's onboarding, what, 500,000 or maybe 1 million drivers around the world every week, something like that, like a tremendous number. But what happens when those people get offboarded, right? That's going to be a real big problem for, Uber might think that's an economic opportunity, but it's also creates a period of instability, which might have adverse effects for anyone creating the technology, right? So I think we need to think about that, whether it's, some form of redistribution or retraining or education or whatever it is. The hard part for me was I thought of these problems, but I have no solutions.
Right.
So us as,
you're thinking about them now.
Yeah.
In the vein of this question, a lot of people don't know, but the idea of stock options was one that before Silicon Valley really embraced it and started giving ownership in the companies to all the employees in a company, that wasn't something that you see happen. You still don't see that happening across most of the rest of the country, particularly in the flyover states. A lot of the companies that create the most wealth in the flyover states do not give stock options to their employees. And so the wealth literally does not get redistributed to the employees, which doesn't get redistributed into the community. And so that's something that we've been, I guess you could call innovators on for quite a time, to the point where we just don't even talk about it or think about it, right? But like figuring out what the next phase of that is, I think he's right. Like we have a lot to figure out.
So if you're ready to share some thoughts, so you grew up in Montana, if I remember right, and your mom, was it single mom on welfare?
Yeah.
So you've had that experience, and you also had the experience of being very early at Facebook and really being instrumental in a lot of what we see today that's grown.
Yeah.
And in some ways, your experience, there's these two divides, or there's this divide that seems in our culture where the tech community, it seems like everything is great, and there's a lot of middle America, Montana included, where it's like things aren't so great. How do you see us navigating as a people in considering these are the conditions that are showing themselves?
It's pretty hard. My friends from Montana, I'm from Helena, Montana, which if you look at the economic data, doesn't really grow. It's not growing like here, where you have over 80 buildings under construction, and I think more cranes per capita than any city on the planet, right? And in some ways, we're lucky all to live here, right? Like, how lucky are we to experience a place under such growth? But I go home to my hometown, and it still looks like what it looked like in high school, right? And my friends are constantly asking for help. In the form of advice, and I find, I do a lot of work in Montana to try to teach entrepreneurship, work with the governor and the senators of Montana. It's a small place. There's 1 million people, and it's like one of the largest states in the country. But the knowledge, even the kind of stuff I'll say that Justin and the guys at Y Combinator are doing with Startup School to transmit the knowledge of entrepreneurship just into the internet in a format that is consumable and can help people come up the entrepreneurial curve, to me is some of the most valuable thing, some of the most valuable, call it intellectual capital that's going out there into the world. Because at the end of the day, if the jobs are going to change so dramatically, and he's right. You look at things like self-driving cars, automation. There's all these conversations we have in Silicon Valley ad nauseum.
Bill Gates now thinks robots should pay taxes.
Yeah, I actually would kind of like. I think that idea is kind of genius, actually. Although I've had like 2 hours to think about it.
Yeah, I know.
But I think that.
Do you think Silicon Valley has had a certain level of arrogance that the last election has been a blow to? Or?
Unequivocally, yes. Yeah. I think we'd all agree.
Well, I also think you could say that Silicon Valley has more power now than it ever has, and that Donald Trump is the first candidate who's successfully used a lot of the technology that we've created to win the presidency.
Yeah, I'll just bring Rob in.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. So Rob, your position is Vice President of Ads, Pages, and Groups, I believe, at Facebook. So you've been able to watch a lot of things in terms of how candidates are using Facebook, how things have been changing and moving. What are your thoughts? What are your experiences? What do you notice? What do you feel like some of the lessons are from both you as a person, but also you within the kind of behind-the-scenes world of Facebook?
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting to hear just the beginning of this conversation and to try to maybe bridge it in. It may be the case that many of us here were surprised with the outcome, or maybe incredibly fortunate to be part of this, very quickly growing community. But the products that many of us build are used by everyone, and that's certainly the case with Facebook. So Facebook has been, a platform for people to make change in their communities since the earliest days. We saw that happen not just in this country, but really all around the world.
The Women's March was organized largely on Facebook.
Women's March was organized on Facebook. And it's a pretty incredible story, of an event that was created just before, someone went to sleep, and next morning there were already thousands and thousands of people.
Which started with when we launched Newsfeed. I was there at Facebook, and people organized a protest against Newsfeed.
Exactly. First million-person group was to protest Newsfeed.
Been going since day one.
Thanks for that.
But we also had one candidate very successfully use social
Exactly.
media.
So yeah. So I mean, to kind of bring
Whether
that
you
in.
love him or hate him, he knows how to use social media. Period.
Yeah, and I think the good news about that story is that the tools. I mean, look, it's not going to surprise anyone to hear that he has an incredibly engaging social media voice, and that definitely helps in the use of the medium. But the advertising tools that he used can be used by anyone who want to get their voice out, and he used them quite effectively. The campaign used them effectively, and they did things that we openly share are the best ways to use.
Were they
the
doing
product.
hundreds of thousands of different ads a day?
They were doing a good job of measuring their outcomes. They were doing a good job of being smart about their targeting, a good job of iterating and testing and learning, a good job of trying multiple creatives. I mean, just pretty much the way we would tell anyone, to go about using the product and be effective and successful. And I think it was quite effective, and that's not the only candidate who made effective use of the platform. Even over the course of this last election, we tend to see people who make good use of the medium and who have large engaged followings do really well. There are public case studies for the Bernie campaign, and those are worth taking a look at. Like these are very powerful and effective tools, and in this world where we're increasingly connected and using those platforms, it's important to know that.
I know Mark just wrote this whole big new vision statement. Can you say a little bit about where Facebook is going in terms of it feels like he's taken on, Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, feels like he's seen this as a big, I haven't talked to him, but he sees this as a big lesson too. He's like, something has shifted in him and something has shifted in where he wants to take Facebook because of the recent events. Can you say a little bit about where Facebook wants to go?
Yeah, so we talk about these issues quite a bit, and I'm
too.
delighted. Yeah, Dave, you should jump in. I'm delighted that he posted and shared some of his thoughts, which have been really, I think, very encouraging and motivating for all of us over the course of the last few months as we've watched him sort of form those opinions. I mean, I guess from the broadest point of view, he thinks about Facebook as a global community. It's coming up on 2 billion people, 1.8 billion people now using the product, and he just wants to, build tools into the platform that make that global community the kind of place that we all want to live. So in the post that he wrote, he emphasizes 5 areas. He talks about supportive communities, safe communities, civically engaged communities, well-informed.
The word meaningful was, I thought, really important.
Yeah, and in terms of supportive, I mean,
But doesn't that also involve getting off of the computer?
Yeah.
To be fair, he did say that.
Did he say that?
Yeah, to be fair, to give Rob some air cover. I mean, seriously,
Well, it just came out to it.
If you read the section on groups, which I thought was one of the more, there were 2 sections that I thought were the most powerful. The section on groups where they talked about connecting people to groups that
share interest base.
Well, they've done a good job at shared interests, but this notion that there are groups that are meaningful to people, that when they join the group have a meaningful impact on the person's life, and that they're going to use that metric versus just connecting based on common interests, which I thought was really powerful.
A couple of the examples used are parenting groups for new parents, which are very good source of support, and maybe even more meaningful for people is people who have diseases, especially rare ones.
Yeah, and mental health.
Connect to each other.
Right. Okay, great.
And that was called out specifically.
How do you balance, because you've been trying to turn off your phone more from Facebook updates I've seen. How do you navigate that world where human connection is important, silence is important, getting away from everything is important, as well as some connectivity is important? because it feels like part of this human community has an in-person element. It has a digital element, but it also has an in-person element. Do you see, how is that experiment going in your life?
I think that, in the context of everything that's going on, there's this notion that we used to talk about at Facebook a lot, that the medium is the message. And that one of the things that I think people are missing about what's happening right now is that we're shifting off of the printing press and mass media as a technology and into this internet-based society, which is a huge deal. And I don't think that we actually don't talk about it very much. We just kind of experience it, and we all try to turn off our notifications. And one of the questions that I keep thinking about in the context of what you're saying is that I'm working on a project right now called Sunrise, and we're trying to find the cure for depression. And my partner in this is UCLA, and we saw the UCLA campus data showed that the number of students with depression since the election has doubled. And so to me, that says we have a national psychological disaster on our hands in the country. And how do you deal with that? There's these hard questions, is social media exacerbating this problem? Sometimes I turn on Facebook, and this is a system that I helped work on. I have a lot of pride about, also have a lot of questions about. I honestly feel pretty bad about a lot of what's, I think I have all the mixed feelings that everybody has, but sometimes I turn it on and it's a fear machine, and how do you deal with that? Do you deal with it just through meditation? Do you deal with it through, I live in Mill Valley. We've built a group in Mill Valley on Facebook. It's a Facebook group. It has hundreds of people that are all what I would call mindful. They're part of either the creative community, the mindful community, whatever. And the whole point of it is to use that digital tool to get people together in the real world, right? And so I don't think we can sort of just turn it off, if that makes sense. But we also have to consume, to Justin's point, the information diet in a balanced way, but also use the tools to create offline community as much as possible. And I'm actually pretty encouraged by you guys made some specific feature recommendations yesterday that to me, running a group that's for the Mill Valley community will actually, the stuff you guys put in that letter will actually meaningfully improve the ability to deliver on that, which actually seems pretty positive.
Yeah, and I think it's probably worth talking just for a minute about some of the healthy information diet sort of aspects of what we discussed yesterday. Having a well-informed community is a really important priority. There are a lot of people working on that right now, and there are a lot of dimensions to that problem. Because it's a short-form medium, you do tend to see less nuance in it. And that can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. And so the focus on recent focus on accuracy is important, but even more important over time is working on sensational content, divisive content, polarizing content, and trying to present a more balanced spectrum of points of view over time and sort of evolve into a much richer and more representative sample of opinions in the product.
Right. Justin, let's bring you in here. So I know this. I read your post on Medium, which was, I thought, a beautiful description of what the lessons are learned. And I know that you've been enormously skillful at knowing how to create amazing companies that get a lot of attention. I got from the post that you feel like there's a new challenge for you now, or a new challenge for the entrepreneur community, which is not only creating something that gets a lot of hits, a lot of page views, a lot of people looking at it, but actually does something a little bit different. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to what you see potentially as this new cycle, and maybe this is where Facebook is going to, but it feels like there's kind of a new chapter of yes, it's great if we can get all these people to do X, Y, or Z, but then there's this other piece of does it bring us together? And I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how that might begin to shift.
Well, I think I don't really have a solution, like I said, but I think people,
And can I just mention, you were the very first person who decided to live stream your life.
Yeah, it's great.
I was living across the street from him, ironically.
He wore a camera on his head, and he was literally going to live stream his life. So at any time, you could just go and see what Justin was doing.
I think he's
lived in the future, in other words.
I've lived in the future. I think that we in Silicon Valley in the past, since I've been an entrepreneur here for the 12 years, and in that amount of time, people are constantly obsessed with figuring out, testing things and figuring out how people want to interact online, and what works, what resonates, and building a machine or machines that respond to that feedback cycle and give people more of what they want. And I don't think that we, myself being the first to admit guilt here, have thought about what are the consequences if we build that machine. Like, what happens to the world in the when we build all these machines that do that. And so now we're starting to have more discussions about that. Whether we have like, are we addicted to our phones? Have we built things that are too good, right? Or we don't think about the consequences of that. And there's a lot of like, human beings are very primitive in a lot of ways, and a lot of what we are creating are things that mimicked ways that we wanted to interact, or we longed for interactions we longed for that we used to have, right? In maybe historically, and so. I think you have unintended consequences where you have people who might spend, the average Instagram post might take 30 minutes to create, but the net consumption time is like much less than that, right? It might be just seconds as your friends scroll by and like, but people don't have that perception, right? They don't actually understand that when they're creating that content. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe that's not a problem, but it's we have created a lot of disparities where there's like. I think that where people have a certain impression of what's happening online, and that's different from maybe the reality of it.
I think it's a problem. I mean, I think it's the main problem in some ways is the speed of the change that's happening.
And the quantity.
I mean,
most people in the Middle Ages never met more than 150 people in their entire life.
Yeah. We've already completely changed, revolutionized the way our economy works in our own past, but it took 100 years to go from farming into manufacturing, and now it's the disruptiveness of technology and the way that it's changing the way the world's working is happening inside of a lifespan, maybe even multiple times inside a lifespan. And I think just helping people appreciate that even though technology is indeed moving quickly and we can consume lots and lots of information in just a fraction of a second, like humans haven't changed that much. I was very struck by the Bureau of Labor Statistics stats on where jobs will be created over the next 10 years, and the largest sector will be healthcare, which is just, people taking care of each other.
Yeah. And to pick up on this thread, of speed, and, it's interesting because I think that, people are experiencing more and more information, and to the point on not meeting more than 150 people in your lifetime, you can say one wrong thing on the internet and have 150 or like 100,000 trolls attack you. I've experienced it. I woke up for 2 years with people telling me I should die and like leave Silicon Valley for saying one wrong thing on the internet. And what we like, back to my point on depression, we know that it's rooted in trauma. You're talking about a world where you can experience trauma at a rate and speed that's like at numbers beyond anything you can possibly imagine. Yet to his point on disparity on social media, we haven't invented a new antidepressant in over 25 years. So we're still using this very basic human, flesh and bone brain technology to like try to interact with this like system that's giving you input that's like so aggressive and sometimes so negative that we're literally not designed for it. And yet, we're not closing the gap. Yeah.
And do you feel like you experienced trauma? How would you describe your experience with trauma? That was, you would call that a traumatic experience?
Oh, yeah.
Just to read those, even though you didn't know who the people were or what was going on?
Yeah, you wake up every day and open Twitter for 2 years and have people, I think you've got some people talking about bullying later.
Monica Lewinsky's here to talk about it,
you experience that for 2 straight years, like it has an effect. Like I don't care who you are.
Right.
I think we can all.
I think
there's some interesting links between trauma and depression. I'd love to explore offline. But you were going to say something, Justin?
Well, we're living in a world now of unintended consequences, right? I think if we in Silicon Valley, who we think we're really smart, but we're not really planning for what actually the results of our actions are going to be.
Right.
You have all of these people who are working on companies that are racing to automate a huge amount of jobs away as ways to create economic value, but we're not saying how is that value going to be assigned, and if it's all of a sudden like assigned to the couple million people who work in this area in Silicon Valley and not any of the other 300 million people in the country, that could create a tremendous amount of unrest that has consequences that we won't even know until it
Right.
exists.
Right.
That situation exists, and for political and structural reasons, it's really hard to have conversations about redistribution or universal basic income, however you want to call it, right? But I think it might be the moral thing to start thinking about what is going to happen when we do the things that we're trying so desperately to do here.
And which will mean like AI and technology will just,
Sure,
it's
I
just
mean,
going to take away more jobs. There's no way to cut it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the innovation areas in Silicon Valley right now, now that mobile has kind of peaked and is ubiquitous, are focused around effectively verticalization, using technology to build verticalized companies that save money, that compete by being more efficient. One of the ways that people do that happens is by removing human effort out of systems.
And so if you like, Amazon has their first, I don't know if it's opened yet, but I saw the video, their first store where there's no humans.
Right.
You get something and you check it out. But it also makes a lot of sense where if you're fearing where technology is going and a candidate comes and says, I'll protect you, I'll take care of you, I'll fight for you, that candidate looks very appealing.
Absolutely.
Right? Because who's going to protect us against the changing world? But I don't think that's the right answer, is to need a very strong, boisterous personality to protect us.
There's this question of, I mean,
I said
one of
that.
the things that's amazing, I was talking with Michael Murphy from Esalen a couple weeks ago, and he was making the point that, through this community and through the Esalen community, we've seen an extraordinary variety and number of jobs that have been invented and created in areas that are brand new, that nobody ever would have thought of, or that came from places in the world that nobody researched before. And so there's this interesting question, which is how do we, midwife more of that into the world, and create a counterculture, or take this counterculture that we're all a part of and get more people involved.
I think for me, it's like
create more jobs.
It's jobs and it's happiness. 'Cause
Yeah.
There's a lot of people with jobs who aren't happy.
And
So there's a quality of life.
A new kind of job.
Because there's a lot of people in Silicon Valley who have great jobs, make tons of money, but the happiness index is very low. We all know them. You start a company, you sell it for this, you have to sell the next one for that, and you destroy your life in the meantime. But go ahead.
I was struck by there's some work done on how automatable various jobs and job functions are, and it turns out most jobs are not completely automatable, but if you break them down, there are pieces of them that are. And the thing I was struck by was that the least automatable piece is understanding and reacting to other people's feelings.
It's this room.
Yeah. So we just have about a minute left. Justin, you have some final thoughts about the topic and where to go? And we're looking for next year, we're going to have you come back and want to hear your next invention.
I'll have to think of it first, but I don't think that there's easy answers here. I don't think there's an easy solution. I think even if we do our best, even YC or investors in Silicon Valley do their best to create companies and opportunities for entrepreneurship, that's not going to be enough to kind of fulfill the replacement rate that the automation curve is going to have. So I think we have to. I don't know. I guess my final thought is we should all think about it, because it's going to be a really big problem. It's already a big problem, and it's manifested itself in the current political environment, but it's going to be an even bigger problem pretty soon. So we should probably sit around and think about ways to do something.
Well, the philosopher Gurdjieff supposedly said the first thing you need to do before you get out of prison is to know that you're in prison. Before then, you can't get out. No. So I think we're beginning to realize that there is an issue, and like you said, in the past, it has to do with an uprising and people getting hung or whatever else, which we do not want to do. But there's only so much something can stretch before it breaks.
Absolutely.
Rob, do you have closing thoughts?
I guess the only thing I would say, very much in sort of concert with Mark's note, whether we like it or not, these technologies are here and they're affecting the way we live, and I think the best way we can work with them is to try to bend them into creating a world that we all want to live in, and there's just a huge amount of work to do there, and people in this community can really help.
Great, thank you. Dave?
I think that this community in this room is has a conversation and is part of a culture which deserves to go mainstream at this time. And that, like Rob said, this is about creation versus destruction. It's about love versus fear. It's about openness versus closed. It's about freedom, of personal choice and being able to experience things that we all know are the answer. But, we're up against a very real and very fearful culture. And this culture is an amazing one of love. And I think that now is the time to figure out how to translate that into the mainstream rather than just being in this room.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's a great way to end it. So we're going to go work on that now. And thank you, panelists, for joining us and really being open and honest. And I love the fact that we can, as a community, reflect and have lessons learned and also think thoughtfully about how we go forward. So I really appreciate it.
I think there's a lot of truth to the fact that there's been increasing economic inequality, and that's seen by people all across America and in the middle of the country and in a lot of cities that aren't in Silicon Valley and the Bay Area. People don't feel like they are participating as well as they have in the past decades in the economy, and that's only going to continue, right? Lots of the things that we're working on are things that increase, income inequality and create more of a winner-take-all market. So, like, I invest in a company that's a self-driving car company, right? My brother and my co-founder from Justin TV started called Cruise, and that is going to happen at some point. And what's going to happen to all the people who are driving Uber?
So and you sold your last company, Twitch, to Amazon, I think, for just shy of $1 billion.
That's
so
right.
What do we do with people like you?
Well,
because the tech is creating vast amounts of wealth in a beautiful way, but how does that?
Absolutely.
Have you thoughts on how that can become more of a shared uprising?
Yeah. So, I'm incentive when income inequality becomes too much. Historically, that's really bad for everyone, including rich people, because what happens is there's French rebellion and we get strung up somewhere or so I think it's very concerning, and the question is not, to me, it's like people will always find new jobs to do, right? U.S. used to be more of an agrarian society, it's transitioned to one that's much more based on an information economy, right? And that happened over hundreds of years, but people there's still jobs, or we have new jobs. Social media celebrity is a job, right? Mm-hmm. Snapchatting might be a job, but the question is how we make that transition, right? And I don't think we're thinking very actively about that right now. And if there's Uber's onboarding, 500,000 or maybe 1 million drivers around the world every week, something like that, like a tremendous number. But what happens when those people get offboarded?
As I had kind of mentioned in the intro, there's been huge shifts in our country, which nobody can really doubt. And the technology community is a really important voice and a really important community and a really important part of how our world operates and unfolds. And social media and Facebook and Twitter are places where they're not just places where friends connect now, they're places where political views are shared, opinions are shared, people win elections or don't win elections in part by their use of those. And so the next 30 minutes is really just a discussion about what are the lessons that the technology community can learn going forward, and how do we look at recent events and also begin to kind of break this barrier that exists between the two parties and the two kind of opinions that don't really serve us. And so I'm happy to have Dave and Rob and Justin to kind of share your thoughts and views on where we go from here. And for me anyways, and people could disagree with me, I feel like there was one candidate saying, we're going to go forward, even though I didn't feel like she was super enthusiastic about the forward. Another candidate saying we're going to make America great again and go back. And technology has been pushing so fast forward, and we have change happening at such incredible levels, and we haven't always been as thoughtful about the impact of that change. So I would just love to start by hearing how you see this world, how you see the kind of chain of events that have happened, and your sense on kind of what are some of the lessons we can learn from that. Do you want to start, Dave?
Do I have to?
You don't have to, no. We can start on the other side. Justin, do you want to start?
Sure. So I guess the election was an eye-opener for me, as it probably was for many of you. And I think it brought to mind two things. One was kind of more of an immediate pressing question, and one that's a longer-term question. And the more pressing question, which I was very depressed about in the beginning, but surprisingly, I think things are actually happening, was that we've, kind of online in our communication medium, whether it's Facebook or Reddit or Twitter, we've created these systems where we give people what they want, right? A lot of people have talked about filter bubbles and how people are able to create their own information diet where they just consume the things that they want. People, whether you're liberal or you're conservative, whoever you are, you want things that confirm your existing biases. And it's very hard to resist that. That's just human nature. And so we've created a lot of systems that reward that, right? Whether it was Facebook 6 months ago or other social media platforms. And without, I think, thinking about some of the potential consequences, especially political consequences. And so I think that was one big problem for Silicon Valley, and for I think that the sites I've worked on are maybe a little bit more entertainment focused. So I certainly, for me, it was never something I thought about, like what type of information are we giving people. And then the second thing, more longer term, is